you were doing a lot of shoulder content related
Mhm.
to the broadcast. So why did you decide to make this career move now?
Yeah, I think, I don't want anyone to have any misconceptions about, like, why I would have left Riot because my job at Riot was really, really good. Like, I got to cast games, I got to do content that I wanted, people respected my ideas when I pitched for new segments, but at the same time, just as a person, I'm always open to exploring new opportunities. And coaching is something that has been in the back of my mind for like a really long time. So even when I was a pro league player back in 2011, like the idea of, hey, maybe if I just talk strategy all day and, gave the right types of feedback on how to play around the map, that could work. But like there was actually no infrastructure in North America to make anything like that happen. And then I joined Riot as a QA analyst, and then they started the LCS. And part of my casting has always been pretty analytical, pretty data informed. I'm always trying to predict the meta or predict a pick that's going to be coming out next. So it's really interesting to me. But then I think the things that have happened throughout the past 8 years, 9 years even since I was a pro player is like there's a lot more infrastructure. There's a lot more maturity amongst the players. And I think I've also gotten a lot better at talking to people and understanding different ideas. I think from working through multiple different teams at Riot, through the design team to the production team. So I think I kind of have that skill set and then I can merge it with some of my game knowledge that I've accumulated over the years. And it just seemed like a really, really cool opportunity that if I didn't jump on, I'd regret it later. So I'm really looking forward to what it's going to be like with Team Liquid.
I'm gonna return to actually a lot of the stuff you said there, but I do want to
Yeah.
touch a little bit on like this idea of casting. And like when I saw this move, I was like, that kind of makes sense given, again, like we're kind of casual acquaintance. What little I know of you, the only thing I think we've ever talked about is like analytical stuff whenever we've
Yeah,
talked off the
yeah.
record. But like it seems like casting, once you reach kind of the top of a broadcast, there's two options. One, you can just continue to like perfect what you do and have kind of a production handle in things, right? Like I think
Mm,
we see Quickshot doing that over with the LEC broadcast, and he's doing a phenomenal job over there. Or like I do see a lot of casters being like, okay, I've reached this point, now I want to do something else. Like now I want to
mm.
explore something else creatively. What do you? I guess just what in general, what do you think of the state of casting right now in League of Legends? And like why is this kind of a next step for you specifically?
I think the state of casting in League of Legends, I think it's actually really strong. I don't agree with some of the stuff I've heard from the, I don't know, nostalgic people maybe on Reddit or Twitter that are talking about, the good old days when all these other casters were there. Because I think the casters that are in the scene now have worked a lot towards perfecting their craft, being analytical, and also being entertaining at the same time. But I think to more answer your question, it's just a matter of what you want to pursue next. Because I don't
Mhm.
necessarily agree that once you cast the world final, there's nothing left to attain. Like even me personally, when I was setting my own goals for 2020 as a caster, is like starting what is now on hiatus, but the JLXP, which is my own individual podcast, is its own exploration in itself. There were several
Mhm.
episodes where I just didn't talk with anyone. I just talked myself for 20 minutes. And that's a skill that needs to be developed over time. And that's actually additive to your casting when you need to fill a certain moment of time or when you need to go really deep on a specific topic. So I think when I look over at the traditional sports landscape, that's where I think esports can still pull terms of how commentary works. And you look over there, and there are several commentators that have been casting for 30 years, right?
Mhm.
And they have their own style and they have improved or gotten worse over the years because the game changes and their partners change. And it's a constant challenge to make sure you're staying at the top of your game. But also, that's kind of some of the inspiration I took when I was moving to a coaching role is I look at somebody like Steve Kerr, who was a player who won multiple championships with the Chicago Bulls and the San Antonio Spurs. Then he was a commentator for TNT for several years. Then he was a general manager of the Phoenix Suns. Then he was a commentator again. And then he coached the Golden State Warriors to multiple championships. So I think it's actually somewhat common for people who really like diving into the analysis of the game to also want to bounce between actually testing your theories versus just saying them. And I think that's a difference. Like there's the analysts that are more likely to bounce, but then
Mhm.
I think more the traditional play-by-play guys, they're the ones that are more likely to go the long haul, so to speak, and just continue to do commentary because their drive is much more, I think, towards presentation and storytelling, whereas some analysts, their drive is more towards like competitiveness and being right. So there's a difference in personalities.
So I'm gonna go back to a few things you said in your first statement,
Mm,
especially taking a lot of the analytical work you do for the broadcast to a coaching perspective. Like, what
mm.
strengths do you think you have as a person that you can translate into being a coach for Team Liquid that you've kind of built up over time?
I think there's a lot of little things that I won't necessarily go into too much detail about, but I think one of the strengths could just be clarity. I think there are a lot of opinions about how to play League, especially with a team as experienced as Team Liquid. I mean, it's one of the appealing things actually about coaching TL is that it's not just a bunch of guys who just emerge from their parents' house and now need to be professionals. Like we got Impact, Core JJ, Jensen are all 25, right? Tactical is actually extremely mature for being at a young age. And Brox is a guy who's been to the world final and is just a full professional.
Mhm.
So I don't have to worry about those things. But what I do have to be able to do is I have to be able to facilitate the different opinions and kind of decide on a direction because it's really hard with all these really experienced players who have had so much success. Like they're very used to getting their way. So I think my biggest strength, hopefully, is that I'm going to be able to understand where they're all coming from and then try and unite people towards like a common goal.
How many times on the broadcast desk or analyst desk or even like behind the scenes did you have to facilitate or mediate discussions?
I think that was actually pretty common. It's obviously lower stakes, but
Mhm.
even take like an LCS story. When you're trying to plan a 30-minute countdown show, you need to decide your priorities of what's most important to talk about. When you have 3 minutes between segments, you need to be very clear about what the important thing to talk about is. So there was a lot of talking to other analysts, seeing what they think is interesting, you telling them what you think is interesting, not giving away too much because you do want a lot of the natural conversation to come across
Yeah.
on desk. Sorry about potential.
Yeah. We'll like pause for a minute. I think you're roboting
Sure.
a bit.
Okay. Yeah. When did you lose
Okay.
me? I can restart from that point.
At about when you were talking about like it really started cutting out after you were talking about how you need really clear direction in between like 3 minute segments for the desk.
Yeah.
I would just clarify after that.
Yeah, so I think in terms of it's obviously I mentioned lower stakes than you were going to
Mhm.
have on a competitive game, but there's a lot of opinions within a broadcast team or within a game design team, right? Deciding what should be nerfed or buffed or how it should be done, and taking in negative feedback and understanding where it comes from, and when you're giving your own feedback, understanding how it's going to be perceived, and doing conflict resolution and making sure relationships are strong. Uh, I actually think I have a decent amount of experience in those fields, and I'm hoping that I can apply that into league coaching.
One of the things you kind of mentioned with your previous job is, and this kind of ties into something you already said about TL, but I'll just ask it for
Sure.
clarification. You mentioned, like you are obviously very well respected within your field on broadcast. When you speak, I assume, or I'm going to make the assumption because they should be listening to you that you're like well listened to, right? Like even if
Mm.
people disagree with you, they're going to respect your opinion. what do you expect from the players of TL? Because this is actually no shade at TL. I actually don't think the players on TL are like this, but I do
Yeah.
think one of the most difficult things probably in making the transition to coaching is kind of establishing your position as a respected figure from the get-go.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think that's one of those things that, even if I've been a caster for 8 years or that I was a pro in the dark ages back in 2011, that doesn't buy me respect. Like,
Mhm.
I think the respect has to be earned, so I I'm work I my plan is to work towards that. I've been with the team for 8 days so far, so it's definitely a process, but yeah, I think overall, it's about taking things slow. It's about asking a lot of questions, right? It's about getting a good working relationship with every player individually to know that I respect what they have to say. And then in turn, they can respect me when I'm able to challenge things smartly and relate it to the bigger picture. So uh, I agree, getting respect as a head coach is extremely important, but I also don't expect to just be unilaterally listened to from day one because I don't want that either. If I'm saying something stupid, I want the players to be able to call me out on it so we can all find the correct answer as a unit.
And then one of the things you said in your initial video for TL is that you actually thought that the team really lacked an identity for most of the spring split.
Mhm.
What kind of identity do you think this TL team can have going forward? Or, I mean, obviously that's a work in progress, but like,
Yeah.
what do you think is the number one thing you can improve on from TL in spring to TL in summer as a coach?
Yeah, I'm not gonna get too specific on this because then maybe
That's
that'll
fine.
help teams, like, pick and ban against us, but I think it wasn't even me that necessarily needed to say the team lacked an identity. I think every individual player said that the team lacked an identity in the squad episode that they released after the week 9 loss to Cloud9. So, I think my hope is the biggest thing that I can add to the team is clarity and direction so the team is actually specifically working towards something. I think that was one of the biggest problems in spring is they definitely freestyled a little bit, kind of throughout the whole split. Whether or not that was the way you're approaching practice, whether or not that's the way you're approaching a game. So getting everyone to commit to structure and preparation is just going to allow all of the talent to flourish because the coaching staff with Kane is a genius about the game, right? We brought in Croissant as well. He's really smart. Um, and then we also have all the players who've won so many splits or world championships or all these accolades. So there's so much talent. And I think the biggest thing I can provide is a direction so we can find the identity together.
What do you think of the landscape in North America overall? Because I know that another thing that you had said in your introduction video is like it's actually and then this should be obvious to anyone who has seen you on broadcast, but like you obviously really care about North American League of Legends. Like you want it to be better.
Yeah.
So when you look at the state of NALCS or just LCS now, currently, how much of a role do you think you can have in trying to improve that overall? Or is that too big of a task to
Yeah.
kind of put on your shoulders?
I think right now it would be way too arrogant to say that I'd be able to improve it. That's definitely something I want to be able to do. But I think first and foremost, I don't want to put I might have the wrong saying, like the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
I've seen so many teams in LCS history. Once they do well in NA and then they fall short of their next goal, which is international, they say like NA doesn't matter, and like that's actually their death. Is as soon as they think that NA doesn't matter, they cease to be a good team. So that's the number one focus is like, how do we get Team Liquid back to being a top team in North America? How do we compete with Cloud9? How do we make it so that we're better than everybody else, right? Those are the things we're focusing on first. And then we'll move into those more difficult problems that everyone in NA has been experiencing for the past half decade.
Out of curiosity, this is in no way related to the coaching discussion, but just
Sure.
I'm always curious to know because the region I watch the most of by like the love of it and also just the fact that it has the most games is the LPL,
Of
obviously.
course.
And I've seen
Yeah.
them succeed for the past 2 years, despite the fact that I've been very critical of a lot of these teams that have won.
Yeah.
What do you think NA is missing at international tournaments from an analytical perspective? Not like we know about the solo queue, we know about
Sure.
all of the other extenuating circumstances, but from like a more purely analytical perspective, why do you think North American teams falter on international stages?
Uh, I think overall, and maybe this sounds too negative, and maybe I've just watched them like over and over again. It's like I think it's a little bit unfair the way NA gets so criticized for being the fourth best region. Clearly, like we were clearly better than the fifth best region because if you look at all the extenuating factors, that's where they should be. China has the most players and the most money. Korea has the best solo queue and the best infrastructure. Europe has more players, and has also in recent years improved their infrastructure greatly, which has allowed them to surpass NA. So naturally, this is how it should have been in the past. In fact, the fact that NA was actually better than Europe back in 2014 when the European teams didn't make it out of group stage, like that was actually a huge accomplishment for NA based on player base sizes. So I think having an attitude that winning at Worlds shouldn't come naturally and you need to be exceptional in order to overcome these obstacles is hopefully what's missing from some of the NA attitude where they're just like, yeah, of course, we're going to walk in here and take it. Like, no, NA is actually an underdog. You need to have an underdog mentality in order to succeed eventually, because then it'll happen eventually. Like the reason this is probably going too far back. Like the Cubs or the Red Sox losing for 90 years actually made them really popular. Like in a sense, like I'm hoping that can happen for NA, but that's because they have the storybook ending at the end, not the 90 years of losing. I want the victory at the end, but the way you get there, like you have to accept a lot of things that may seem negative in order to overcome them eventually.
I mean, I grew up as a Red Sox fan. I never thought they'd win in my lifetime. So
There you go.
I'm also old. They didn't win until I was in college. Um, just wrapping it up, what is your number one personal goal for you coming in as Team Liquid coach?
Oh, geez. I just want to get comfortable. Right now, I'm being a sponge of a bunch of information, and I mean, right now the priority is making it to Worlds. So if we
Hmm.
do that, that's a good step, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join
Yeah,
me. Thanks for answering the North American question. I know we
yeah,
have talked about it previously, but I was like, while he's here, I might as
yeah.
well
You
ask
may
it.
as well. Maybe that could be the Reddit thread because that's all people like
Yeah,
talking about.
right.
Um,
Well, all the best with Team Liquid. Thank you so much for joining me today. And for more League of Legends coverage, keep it here on ESPN Esports.